You have to realize Alan Greenspan was and is a brilliant mind, doing brilliant things in the real world, but in his 20s, he's sitting with me in New York in our apartment, in my apartment, and telling me that he cannot say for a certainty that he exists. And he cannot say for a certainty that I, Nathaniel, exist. And he cannot say for a certainty that this conversation exists. That aside, he's got lots of opinions about everything, how the economy works, how the world works, but he denies the possibility of being certain about anything. Even, and this of course is reductio ad absurdum, even he cannot be certain that he exists. So my challenge became to persuade him that he can be certain that he exists.
Alan Greenspan believed in a philosophy called logical positivism. It was an extreme form of rationality that questioned everything and used logic to reach absurd conclusions. To try and save him from this, Nathaniel Branden introduced Greenspan to Ayn Rand. Branden and his wife Barbara were the leaders of the small group that had formed around Ayn Rand. They jokingly called themselves the Collective. And they met in Rand's apartment every Saturday night to read the latest section of the novel that she was writing, called Atlas Shrugged.
Nathaniel liked him. Ayn did not like him at all. Nathaniel did, and began discussing ideas with him. And every Saturday night, the Collective gathered to read what Ayn had written, to read in manuscript what Ayn had written of Atlas Shrugged that week. And finally, Nathaniel persuaded Ayn to include Alan in that. And he loved the book, and he became a loyal member of the Collective.
About the headaches and the hair falling out of those nitrogen...
Atlas Shrugged is set in a science fiction world, but one which is very similar to 1950s America. In it, Ayn Rand attacks head-on the idea of altruism, the care of others, as an organizing principle for society. In the story, the government and the state control everything. But one by one, the creative individuals in America, the industrialists, the inventors, and the artists, are all mysteriously disappearing. They have gone on strike, and they hide out in a remote mountain valley as America falls apart. At the end of the book, they reappear and set out to build Rand's vision of the world to come, a world in which politics has disappeared and is based instead on what she called the virtues of selfishness. The critics hated it.
And let me start by quoting from a review of this novel, Atlas Shrugged, that appeared in Newsweek. It said that you are out to destroy almost every edifice in the contemporary American way of life, our Judeo-Christian religion, our modified government-regulated capitalism, our rule by the majority will. Are these accurate criticisms?
Yes. I'm challenging the moral code of altruism, the precept that man's moral duty is to live for others, that man must sacrifice himself to others. I say that man is entitled to his own happiness and that he must achieve it himself, and nor should he wish to sacrifice himself for the happiness of others. I hold that man should have self-esteem.
Atlas Shrugged was the great disappointment of her life. What hurt her terribly was that when it came out, not a single person whom she considered a peer stood up publicly to say what an achievement that book was. Not one. Nobody. Vicious, horrible criticisms. She felt very alienated. And this small group around her, the Collective, were the only people she had admitted to, in effect, her private world. The world that she wasn't alienated from.
Alan Greenspan remained fiercely loyal to Ayn Rand. He married another member of the Collective, a painter called Joan Mitchell. Together they, and the other members of the group, saw themselves as models for a new kind of world that they were convinced was coming.
We thought of ourselves as being instigators of a revolution that was coming. And we were so enthusiastic about what a difference it was going to make to the world, and we were there, and we were in on it, and we hoped we were contributing even to it.
And what would that revolution lead to?
A totally free society.
At the end of 1992, Alan Greenspan went to see President Clinton. It was a few days after Clinton had been elected. And what Greenspan said in that conversation was the beginning of a revolution. By now, Greenspan was the head of the US Federal Reserve. And what he told Clinton was that his election promises of social reform were impossible. The government deficit was so large, Greenspan said, that if he borrowed any more to pay for his political program, then interest rates would go up and damage growth. But, Greenspan said, there was a radical alternative. Clinton should do the very opposite. Cut government spending. Then interest rates would go down and the markets would boom. Greenspan's idea was simple. Clinton should let the markets transform America, not politics. He said later that he was surprised that Clinton agreed with him.
I had hoped to invest in your future without asking more of you. And I've worked harder than I've ever worked in my life to meet that goal. But I can't, because the deficit has increased so much. There will be many more budget cuts. This is the beginning, not the end. The House has already embarked on that course. There will be more. If our national debt were stacked in $1,000 bills, the stack would reach 267 miles into space.
As Greenspan had predicted, a boom began. And as share prices rose higher and higher, a belief started to grow that this time the boom would be different. It wouldn't run out of control. And the reason was the computers. The computers allowed the banks to create complex mathematical models that could predict the risk of making any loan or investment. This had enormous implications, because if a risk could be predicted, then it could be balanced by hedging against it. For the banks and the hedge funds, this was like a new world. For in the chaos and the volatility of the markets, the computers had, for the first time ever, created stability. It allowed banks to lend money to millions of people they would never have touched in the past. At the same time, the internet and other computer networks allowed businesses to respond to each other's needs instantaneously, and the consumer's desires. It was the cybernetic feedback predicted by the Californian ideologists. And a belief arose that America had now entered into a new age of stability. It was called the New Economy.
Whether they came from Silicon Valley or from Washington, from academia, or from Wall Street, there were a number of leading individuals who basically articulated a body of thought now known fondly as the New Economy. That it was based on the premise of a dramatic and permanent increase in the rate of productivity growth sparked by new information technologies that would let this thing go on forever. This is a sort of manna from heaven. This is the candy that politicians only dream of. I mean, you don't have to do anything. You just push a button, and presto, you've got a brand new economy that creates jobs and prosperity. It's the rising tide that lifts any and all boats, even if there's no water in the ocean.
But Alan Greenspan was worried. Every morning in his bath, he read page after page of data about what was really happening in the factories and businesses of America. And what puzzled him was that the figures showed that actually there was hardly any increase in productivity. Yet reported profits kept on going up. There was something wrong. And in 1996, Greenspan made a speech that warned that the market might be overvalued, that a dangerous speculative bubble was being created.
early December of 1996. Alan Greenspan warned that the U.S. stock market may be in a period of irrational exuberance. And you would have thought the world had come to an end. The politicians attacked him from the left, from the right. Main Street was upset with him. Wall Street was upset with him. And at that point, there was a very unfortunate turn of events because he knuckled under to political pressure. He changed his mind.
Greenspan decided he was wrong. That the computers were increasing productivity in ways that were so new his data couldn't see it. And he went to see President Clinton to tell him the good news. It really was a new economy. Greenspan described it to Clinton as like discovering a new planet. The boom continued, and Time magazine described how a sense of lethargy and quietness came over the White House. It was as if the president didn't have anything to do.
This was a woman who was very powerful in a great many ways, who was mentally more powerful than anyone she met, who was more determined, who was more hardworking than anyone she met. What she would have loved would be to find a man who was stronger than she. She would have loved to meet someone who was smarter than she, braver than she, greater genius. She never met him, but she longed for him all her life. And I think this accounts for her sexual psychology.
In the 1940s, Ayn Rand had married an actor called Frank O'Connor. But now, faced with the hostility to her ideas, Rand turned to the leading member of the Collective, Nathaniel Branden. She told him that she had fallen in love with him. And despite the fact that he was married to Barbara, another member of the Collective, Rand told him that the only rational course was for Nathaniel to have an affair with her.
Oh, I don't think I must be failing to make a certain point clear to you, sir. Ayn Rand thought that she was being rational about anything or everything that she did. So it would never occur to me to ask, did Ayn Rand think she was being rational about that? She would say, if she were here, I can feel her, she would say, why, yes, do you think I would do something if I didn't think it was rational?